Deep in the money covered calls offer the highest level of downside protection. If you invest in deep in the money covered calls, you are trying to capture time premium only and not capital gains. You can use the Born to Sell covered call screener to find deep in the money covered calls quickly, and there are two ways. First, here we are on the general search page where there is a moneyness filter in the middle near the top. This sets the upper and lower bounds for the amount of moneyness that are for the covered calls that are shown in the results table. Right now, we're looking at everything between 10% in the money and 10% out of the money. If you were only interested in things that were, say, between 5 and 15% in the money, you would just set these sliders to 15% and 5% in the money, and now all of the covered calls shown in the results table are between 5 and 15% in the money. On the other hand, if you didn't want an upper bounds, let's say you only wanted 10% or more with no upper bounds on the moneyness, so truly deep in the money, you would set this left slider all the way to the left as far as it'll go, and you would set this right slider to 10%, and now everything in the results table is at least 10% in the money with no upper bounds on how in the money it could be. However, there's still some risk on this page because you see these red dates. Those are earnings release dates that occur before the option expiration date you've chosen. To remove these candidates and not take any earnings risk, you could go to Show Advanced Filters, pop that open, and there's a box here that says Earnings Before Expiration. You can uncheck that so it will not include those. We'll close back the box. And now there are no covered call candidates on this list that have an earnings announcement prior to the option expiration date you've chosen. So that's the first way to find deep in the money covered calls, but there is another. We have a special search mode called Max Protection. I'm going to click on that now. And this is for the risk-averse investors where there's a new control called minimum annualized return here in the top center. The goal is that you would set your annualized return goal on this slider, and then it will find all covered calls that have at least that much annualized return. For example, if you wanted 1% a month, you would set this slider to 12%, because 1% a month is 12% a year. And then it sorts the results by downside protection. So everything on this page has an annualized return of at least 12% a year, and then it's sorted by downside protection, which is an approximation of moneyness, although moneyness is over here. The downside protection does take into consideration the amount of time premium that you would receive for the option as well. And the way you interpret this is, if this particular stock, Medivation, if you were to do this covered call, you buy the stock at $15.95, sell the 10 strike for $6.50, your net debit is $9.45. The stock would have to fall 41% in the next 19 days before you would start to lose money. Now, I don't track this stock. If this were a medical stock, it might have an FDA announcement pending perhaps, or be involved in some litigation. I don't know why that premium is so high. You can remove all the healthcare stocks if you don't want to take FDA approval risk by clicking on the Show Advanced Filters, going over to the Include list, and uncheck healthcare. And now you'll notice that the Medivation is no longer on the list here. So that's another way to remove some risk from FDA announcements or just pharmaceutical companies in general, which tend to be pretty volatile. So that's it. 2 easy ways to find deep in the money covered calls.